Hello ladies, I'm Mrs. Sherman and I am making these videos for my blog. I'd like you to go over there, join us and make a comment, and my donation button is also over there on the left. I don't have comments on the video blog because I'm not wanting to deal with too much social media right now, and I would also like to welcome you here if you are new. I am speaking on homemaking, and this is a homemaker support video, so if you have something you need to do, this will give you something to listen to, and I can keep you company, I hope, while you work. Now, the average amount of listening time that I notice, people will tune in for about 10 minutes and then quit. But you don't have to watch anything here. You can just go about your business at home and have something in the background, somebody that's positive and cheerful, I hope, talking to you, and I will share with you some stories. And I have divided my homemaking speech into three categories. First of all, I will talk a little bit about preparing your appearance and other things for your day at home, and also to prepare your home to actually work in and to get done. There are some techniques that I use. Maybe you won't. Don't do everything I do, but it's interesting to hear what other people are doing. Maybe you would enjoy knowing what I do. I'm by no means an expert. There's always some kind of hot spot in my house that hasn't been attended to. And also, I like to deal at the end uh, with people, because you're working around people, you have a family, and maybe you have other associations that you have to deal with or that you look forward to being with, and I want to give you a few pointers about that. And today I'm wearing my, because I'm going to do appearance first, I'm wearing my daisy dress, which is 100% cotton, and the fabric is from Joann's, and it comes in several other colors. It comes in a light blue with white daisies with gold centers, and it comes in a dark blue and a green. And so I also was looking in my china cabinet to find a teacup that had daisies on it, and I used to have one that was just a daisy emblem on it, but I used it so much that finally I wore the thing out. But I found one that has some little daisies in it. I don't know if I can get close enough here to show you that there is a daisy in there somewhere, I think. Yeah, right there on the end here. I'll get a picture of it for you on my blog if you want to go look. And this is an unusual piece. It's by Alan Nelson Collection, made in England. I never could find anything else about it. It was some kind of giftware. It's in perfect condition. I got it at an antique store, and looks kind of like the hedgerows, doesn't it, of roses. It doesn't actually match my dress, but it was the only thing I could find that came anywhere close to it. So now I want to start out with why your appearance is so important if you are homemaking, and if you're new to homemaking especially. This is so important to set your mood and to give you confidence and to give you a feeling of being in charge of your home. And you know, there's a scripture in, I believe it's Titus 2, that talks about the woman is to be the keeper of the home. Was that 1 Timothy 5:14 maybe? She's to keep the home. And First Timothy talks about being the guard and the guide of the home. And looking that up in Greek, it indicates something like a military guard, a military guide and guard. And so that means it's serious. And so you're being watchful, you're being careful, you're taking this whole matter seriously, because the home is not to be taken lightly. It's not just some place you go and everybody crashes and just kind of doesn't care, especially the homemaker. She's to guard it, guide it, and keep it. And that is so important. And that's why in the olden days, before my time, believe it or not, there were, and by the way, it's getting really scary around here when I'm finding out that not very many people are older than me anymore. I used to be young, and people were older than me. It was kind of fun. But so I wanted to say something about guarding and guiding the home. And in the olden days, let's say Victorian times, that's probably the closest to our time because we all have photographs. It's when the first cameras came out. We all have photographs of our ancestors. And when they had household help, they would wear a cap and an apron to indicate what their position was, but also it gave them a sense of who they were and what they were there for. So that's why I suggest you find some nice aprons and wear aprons over your clothes, because they will help with the wear and tear. Now, I make my clothes because I like to sew. I don't know very many people who, personally, I don't know very many people who sew their own clothes, but I never get tired of it, and I just love it. And this is an old Laura Ashley pattern from the olden days, and some of the patterns that I missed getting back in the 1980s, I have now been able to find on the web. So it's an absolute delight and wonderful time to be alive, because you can get things that you missed out on. And so I want to talk about your appearance and why it's so important to do your hair, and to make yourself look happy in the mirror, and to use the skin treatments that you need. I've been lately using avocado oil on my skin, and I don't mind wearing a little makeup, because if I've got some barrier between the cosmetics and my skin, like some kind of oil, someone suggested I try castor oil, which I guess is pretty good, but I like what I'm using, and I basically am using cosmetics from Wet n Wild right now. And I wanted to complain about the name. I thought, why don't they have cosmetics called Sweet and Serene, or Contented and Calm, or Farmland, or something like that? And I'm broadcasting from outside because I thought you'd like to see the freshly plowed field. Most of the time that is totally green, but it's been taken up, the crop has been taken up, and it's been plowed again, and I guess reseeded. They're always busy around here. The farmers never quit. Even in winter, they're doing something. And so have been wanting to do this for a long time. You will hear some noise. There's a small plane flying around over here, and there are a couple of tractors still in the background, and you may hear the braying of a donkey. So there is commotion out in the country, and if you're not used to it, and you come out and stay with me, the first night you have the window open, you won't be able to sleep because the noises are different. But eventually you get used to them. So I think it's really important to look lovely at home. You get to a stage in your life possibly that maybe you don't go out as much, and we certainly don't. It's quite a distance, it's quite an expense, and so I like to dress up every day, make every day special. And I don't know if you have noticed this, but you might notice that the days that you decide you're just going to get out of bed and hit the floor running and not fix your face and your hair and take a shower and put on clean clothes, you think you're going to get so much more done if you don't take time out to do that. And you might find that that's the day you have all the accidents, and that's the day you have all the whiny children, and that's the day that you actually don't get very much done. You just seem to go around in circles. You just seem to be treading water. So I would suggest dress up every single day. Be kind to your husband and children. You're the person that they see. You may be the last person they see when they leave the house for some reason. And they need to see that their mother looks beautiful, that she's happy. And I think it's really good for you, though, too, because it gives you confidence. And one of the reasons that a lot of women don't go into full-time homemaking is they have a memory of home as being a place that you come to after a 5-day week, and you just kind of sit around and not care what you look like for a week, for the weekend, or you come home and that weekend is just so pounded full of work and activities that you didn't get to do during the week. So what you learn to do when you're a homemaker is to pace it out during the week. And I reminded you in a previous video that the women of the olden days, and that was back in my time, and they had towels that would tell them what day of the week it was, and they'd have a certain day for baking, and there'd be embroidered this little loaf of bread, and it would say Wednesday's baking or Monday's baking, whatever they decided to do. And so you need to space that all out and not do that all on the weekend. And then your weekend is free if you like. Now, my favorite days are not weekends, because weekends is when everybody else is out rushing around. So on the weekends, I do something at home. I might sew a dress that weekend. And then on Tuesday, I'll go somewhere. And I'll go out, and everything's calm, everything's quiet, not very many people out. And so the weekends don't mean as much to me as for myself as Monday. And also, another reason to get dressed and to put on your best look on your face, groom yourself carefully, is the dignity that it offers to other people as well. You'll find you get treated a little bit better. Not that we are concerned about that altogether, but you don't need very much negative to make you disheartened in your job at home. So you want to have good positive, response to you, and because it makes you, it motivates you. And I think this is really important, and it's so important for the children too, to see their mother in happy colors, happy clothing. And I always feel just a little bit better. I know I met a lady the other day, and she was talking about wearing dresses, and I know a lot of you aren't wearing dresses, and for those of you that aren't, I would really strongly suggest you go and find some of those long tops that are very feminine. They have ruffles at the edges of them, and they're long. They kind of go down almost to the knees, and they wear them with their pants, and they're just very feminine, and give you a different, different perspective. And the role that you play is so, the hominess of it all. Anyway, she was telling me that she felt so much better once she started wearing more feminine things, and how much she got done at home. Now, I shod my feet with a pair of good boots. And I mean, you know, I've showed you a picture of them, I think, but they're brown leather, and they have a zipper up the side, and they are very kind to my arches and my ankles, cover my ankles. Home is really quite a dangerous place, you know. Most accidents happen in the home, and so you need to cover your feet and not be going around in a pair of sandals around kitchen equipment or anything. I mean, you can bang your foot against the legs of a bed or a chair and really injure yourself. So I would say cover yourself, cover your feet, and just be prepared. And then think about, before you go to bed at night, think about what you're going to wear the next day. Now, unfortunately, we've been told in not so many words that it's probably vain to even think about this, and you know, women should be thinking about things that are more intellectual. We should be discussing, you know, having our place in politics and everything. But let me suggest to you that homemaking and home living is very political these days, because you know, they'll make politics out of anything. They'll make politics out of anything. I mean, years ago, I'm talking about decades ago, back in the early 1950s, my father said they were going to, that the politicians were so intensely interested in making everything political that one day they would make our water political. And I was thinking, what? Because in those days, water, you know, was just water. And they figure out a way to make breathing political, and they'll figure out a way of making everything. Now, staying home is political. What we want to do is, I wanted to tell you that's really important to have support, and like this support video, because a homemaker works alone. We don't belong to a group, and even if there was a group, who has the time to go and attend a meeting or a support meeting? Our support in our support group and our reinforcement is our success. So today I'm going to talk to you about having success in the home, because that's what will build you up. And you could be surrounded by 100 friends that all love you, but inside, if you don't feel that that confidence of success, you still will have an inner longing and a feeling that something is missing. So I wanted to teach you a little bit about having success, and probably you're way ahead of me on this. And I just wanted to tell you that it's very discouraging to get all the dishes washed in the sink, and then turn around and look, and there's stuff left on the table, and the floor's kind of a mess, maybe not so clean, and the trash needs to be taken out, and just, clutter. So what I would suggest is, this is what I do, and I've learned it over the years. Now, maybe you wouldn't want to do this all the time, but I do it all the time, and that is always clean the surrounding area first before you do the dishes. Get that table cleared, wiped off, put a little centerpiece on it, sweep the floor. I realize you may have to sweep it again afterwards. Sweep the floor, wipe the top of your cooking area, your cook stove and your cooktop. Wipe that up. I always use vinegar. I have a spray bottle I got at the Dollar Tree, and I put pure vinegar in it, and I spray that all over my glass top, cooktop, and over time, some of that grunge comes off. It's interesting, and you can even keep your oven clean with it if you wipe it with your vinegar. So get that all shiny and clean. I like to shine my cooktop with that vinegar and a paper towel, which works the best, and then put a little wax melt on there with a scented candle, so that while I'm washing the dishes, I feel more accomplished. Then get your dishes all lined up and rinsed and put, in the categories in which you're going to wash them or load them into the dishwasher. And do that last, because every now and then you're going to have to stand up and breathe a little bit, kind of look around, and it's nice to look around that room and see that it's clean. It's nice to see all the surfaces of the buffet and everything else cleaned up. Now, I'll do the same thing in the bathroom. I'll go in there. I won't just scrub the tub. I'll clean up around the area first. I'll get all the towels picked up. I'll fold things. I'll put things away. I'll wipe things, clean off the tank, clean off everything, and then I'll scrub the tub last, and then I'll do the floor. But it's because, I'll tell you why, if you get up for a minute and you look around, everything's clean around you, and it is such a joy to look at. It's the same thing with, let's say, the front room, the lounge room, the living room. I'll go around, pick up all the clutter first, straighten up the cushions, and then I might sweep and maybe do the windows or something like that. But to just go right in there and start washing a window or washing up a table doesn't make much sense if you're going to finish it and then look around and you're tired. And that's what I'm saying about the dishes too. You look around and you're tired, you're exhausted. You finish the dishes and then you look around and, oh, there's a table with crumbs on it. Oh, there's a table that still has a dish on it. And, oh, the stove doesn't look good, and I'm so tired. So do all that first, and then do those more intense jobs after all that, so that if you do get tired, you can look around at them and see that it looks nice. Have you ever cleaned a room up and then gone on to do some other task and kept going back to look at that room? And that's what I was talking about in my last post, where I wrote that at the creation, after each day and after each thing was created, God said it is good. Would you like to be able to do that, to look back on a job that you've done and say that it's good? Now, after all this is done, you need to maintain each room. So even though you've cleaned it all up, the kitchen is clean and everything, every now and then during the day you will walk through and just put things aright and maintain it. Don't wait for a cleaning day. Maintain everything. I watched a woman once who just never seemed to be intensely involved in housekeeping or house cleaning, but her house was always nice. And I watched her one day when she invited me over. I kind of watched her, and she would, before she sat down, she does stack some things together, some magazines or something, or she'd grab some things that needed to be distributed somewhere else, and she'd wipe something, and she would straighten something, and she'd move something, and then she'd sit down. And even while she was sitting down, I noticed her eyes were never still. She'd be engaged in the conversation, but she would be looking around to see anything that needed to be done. She was kind of on automatic, and but that's how she operated, and she was always prepared. Wouldn't you like to have your home so available that if something happened that you were needed to open your home for some reason, for someone, or someone was coming suddenly, that it would be always ready? Now, over the years, many of us have just operated on, what would you call it, stress cleaning, where someone's coming and we suddenly clean up. And that was motivation too. We knew that like on a certain day we were going to have something or someone was going to come over, so we would always clean because that day was coming up. But wouldn't it be nice to clean and put everything in order every day, just so that you would always be ready? Wouldn't that be better than stress cleaning, than worrying about that one day coming up? Wouldn't it be better? And that's something that I'm working on right now, is trying to keep it so that it is always available. And that if we do have a problem, like if I have to take someone somewhere, or if I have to if there's any kind of emergency, or just anything that happens, that I can get in and out of my rooms very easily, that I can find things that I need, anything like that, without stressing. Now, I've been talking only for about 21 minutes, so I don't know how much you can do in 20 minutes, and I am going to try to extend this a little bit longer. Now, here comes the fun part, and that is people. And so today I'm going to discuss conversation, because it's so interesting and it can be kind of amusing. Now, if you remember reading about Jane Austen, and sometimes we speak Austenese here at the house, we'd be going down the hall in opposite directions and in each other's way, and somebody will say, "Other way, Mr. Collins." And we have all kinds of sayings like, "She's got over the most trying part," and we insert all that in our language from day to day. And so today I want to talk a little bit about conversation. And remember, you shouldn't be sitting here watching me. I only put the camera here so that you can see where I live and what's going on in the background. The light is fast fading, so hopefully I can hang on here a little bit longer before it gets too dark and talk to you a little bit about conversation. Now, if you want to be a good conversationalist, which I am not always, but if you want to be a good conversationalist, and a lot of this is learned in childhood by very thoughtful parents. I heard a very thoughtful parents tell their little boy who wanted to talk to them, but he kept taking deep breaths, and he would say and everything, and she just took him aside and said, "If you want to get my attention, then you have to know what you're going to say and think about it in your mind. Imagine yourself saying it so that you can say a full sentence without and don't hold me up, because in the future you will be talking to other people, and it's very tiring for them to have to sit a long time trying to figure out what you're going to say. So you'll have to say what you're going to say." And she taught him how to say it, and she had had him tell her, and then she told it fluently, and he would say it back to her. It was so patient the way she was teaching him how to be a good conversationalist and how to speak. Now, one of the most, I think, in order to be a good conversationalist in the home, you have to find out what it is that you don't like. What is it that other people say in conversation, or how do they conduct themselves in conversation that you find the most difficult? And don't do it. Don't repeat the things that people do that generally don't set well with you. Now, years ago in the 1980s, before they had homeschool curriculum, I had to look for books and information and materials that didn't exist, and I was looking for something about conversation. And I happened in an antique store. In those days, you couldn't go on the web and just type it in and find it. But I happened in an antique store, and believe it or not, in the 1980s, a 1960s book was considered antique. And I found this book called The Ethel Cotton Course in Conversation, and there were 12 little booklets that went with it, and one of them was on home conversation, and the others were things like brief conversations, extended conversations, conversations about art, literature, and music, and conversations. See, that is a hay truck. It's full of bales of hay, and So there's lots of noise in the country. Anyway, I'm facing my house and my back is towards somebody else's farm back here. That's really a nice little red barn back there. So it was called the Ethel Cotton Course in Conversation. It was in a box. It was a box set, and the pages are all yellow. But in 1980 to 1962, stuff was sold in the antique stores, and so I brought one out here to read to you, and it is talking about topics and rules. And I ran across this thinking this is excellent. And she had a little booklet. One of these little booklets was called For the Home, which I thought was excellent. And so, general suggestions, topics to avoid. And before I get into this, I wanted to explain one of my first experiences in watching conversation was after I was first married, and I was kind of thrust into this this social life of a preacher, and because I married a preacher, and it was so different in so many ways. And we would be invited out. We'd be invited to people's houses, and they would have several other couples there too. And I experienced listening to things that I had not heard before. And because in our home, of course, our father, he was pretty strict about what we said and what we talked about, and about the manners and things like that. But not everybody is brought up the same way. We were sitting in this home with about 6 couples, and one couple was dominating the conversation, and this is how they did it. Someone asked the man, who do you work for, or where do you work, or where do you live? And someone asked her a question like, how long does it take you to do such and such? And every time the conversation was directed at either her or him, the other person would correct that person. For instance, if she said that she lived 2 miles from the church, he would say, no, it's 1 mile and so many, 1 mile and a half or something like that. And then they would sit there for 5 minutes while they worked that out. And well, she said, well, but I timed it last time, and I looked at the speedometer, and I did this, and this is what happened. And he would say, yeah, but what about the other time? And this went on for 5 minutes. Well, then, the conversation turned to other people, and eventually someone would ask him a question, and he would say, well, that happened back in or when did you get married, or something like that. And he would say, we met in such and such a time, and then we got married at such and such a time. And she said, no, we met in such and such a time, and it was a different year than the one that he had met. And the two of them, this is the way they interacted, and this is what they did in front of other people. And people are kind, and they always invited. They never tried to exclude anyone. And so when it was somebody else that was having a dinner at their house, for fellowship, they invited this couple. And after a few months, one lady could not restrain herself, and someone was involved in the conversation with him and his wife. And this lady said, hold on now, do we have 5 minutes? Because this couple is going to argue about it for 5 minutes. And I think it was what the temperature was, or how hot it was at your house, or something like that. And they were down to this tiny little degree, And do you know that after that brave woman said that, she said, hang on, everybody, they're going to take time out, everybody. Get up and get yourself another cup of tea. They're going to argue for 5 minutes. And do you know that the next time that we saw this couple, this young woman said, we hadn't realized we were doing that. So anyway, that's just a point that I wanted to illustrate, that maybe we're doing things that we don't notice, and we've done it so long. And some of the habits we have in our home life are not necessarily good out in the public. So that's why we need training for our children in conversation, and for ourselves. Now, on one of these pages, she has talks about general suggestions, topics to avoid. I thought you'd really enjoy this one, because 1962 was a completely different era than now. And these apparently were put on as classes, and might have been in videos also at the time. or um, put on as some kind of a public service or something like that. And I haven't. She's got a whole thing in here about how to teach this, and you could go and you could sign up for a class and learn about all these different aspects of conversation, which I wish I could have done. I would have loved to have heard the actual woman's teaching it. Topics to avoid. Never introduce into a conversation topics regarding sickness, operations, or disease of any kind. Do you remember when I told you that years ago, before the older generation passed away, there were ladies that would come and sit in the ladies' Bible class, and of course they'd have the usual, introductions. How are you today, and how have you been this week? And almost all of them would talk about their trips to the doctor and their surgeries, and how where they were operated on and all this. And some of the younger women would actually get physically ill, just get nauseous. And one of the younger women didn't want to come anymore, and someone asked her why, and she said, "Oh, I'd be happy to come as long as it's not another organ recital." So from that we got that term, organ recitals, and that was just one of those stories from the olden days. But so somebody told the ladies at the ladies' Bible class that this is what she had said, and they were a whole lot more careful. And sometimes we just don't know we're doing things. Somebody has to remind us. Okay, number 2, do not discuss personal losses or describe unhappy conditions. And that is something that we learned in the home, that while we might, ask, show sympathy to someone who has had a loss, I think that the other person always knew that they were not supposed to, and from the time we were children, being brought up in the 40s and 50s, we were not allowed to take our circumstances and make other people miserable and unhappy for it. We always kept that to ourselves or quiet, because we wanted to leave people feeling better from having seen us and known us than worse. And I'm sure you've all got a friend. Remember, Jane Austen told stories from what she had observed of the conversations that came into the front living room, or what they called the parlor, of her home, and she put them in her novels. And there are certainly some characters that have these habits that you can certainly write a novel about. And instead of getting depressed, I always like to think of them as a character in my novel. So, do not discuss personal losses or describe unhappy conditions. All of us have had very unhappy conditions in our lives. Some of us brought up very, very strictly, very, very poor, maybe at great disadvantage, not having had a good start in life, having a lot of things to overcome, but we never ever wanted to burden anybody else with it. That was our lot, that was our cross to bear, and we would just try to move forward from there and make the best of it and not dwell on it, and look forward. And this is so important in conversation too. Now, one of the things I always felt uncomfortable with is you get in a group sometimes and they'll want to know you better, so they'll say, "Tell us about yourself," and about your life. And so I learned to be general about everything. Not that there was anything terrible going on in my life, but to be general about it and not get too bogged down in details. Number 3, do not flatly contradict anyone, even if you know he's wrong. Now, this is different than debate. If you're in some kind of a political gathering and you're supposed to take a side and let's hear from the other side, and do you have a rebuttal? That is different. Not everything in the home and in conversation with friends is a debate. And so even though they may say something that is very erroneous and very wrong, it's probably better to take them aside and tell them quietly why you have a different opinion about that. But especially, it sort of makes everyone feel sour. You do not flatly contradict anyone, even if you know he is wrong. Now, there was a lady years ago, I'd say decades ago, because I'm from the olden days, but she'd get together with some relatives of hers come and see her her aunt and uncle and everything, and she was older, and they were all older, but she had been in such a habit over the years of contradicting everything. And if they said, it's a lovely day, isn't it? Or it's, the sky is blue, she would say as opposite as quickly as she was just in such a habit. She would just quickly object, quickly say it was no good, or, it just puts sourness on over everybody. Number 4, do not emphasize your strong dislikes and resentments unless you are sure that others in the group share them with you. That is it's quite a skill to feel everyone and to understand where they are in various subjects, what they believe about various subjects before bringing them up. I usually wait and see if anyone asks me or brings it up. Do not emphasize your strong dislikes and resentments unless you are sure that others in the group share them with you. And one of the most shocking things that I ever saw was someone who was a guest at someone's house when we were guests too, and she said very rudely, well, what are we having? And the hostess, she was just going to bring the food out and let everybody see what it was, and this woman made her describe every little thing so that this woman could decide whether she was going to stay or not. Well, she did sit down for the meal, but when certain thing was served, she says, oh, this is disgusting. And I know in some countries you can say something's disgusting and nobody thinks anything of it, but in America you don't say the word disgusting. It upsets their stomachs. It's just almost it really does turn you off your food if someone said this is disgusting. And it's a bad example for little kids, because you're sitting there with your family and you're trying to, you want your children to eat and you want them to eat properly, and somebody says, oh, this is disgusting, well, then the child is very suggestible and impressionable, and he doesn't want to eat. So you've got to be careful what you say. Number 5, do not make cynical remarks or repeat unfounded gossip about people who are being discussed. Now, cynical remarks can be found in my article on cynicism. All you have to do is type in cynicism or cynic up in the little search area of my blog. Or I believe the article was called Living an Abundant Life, or Living Abundantly, or something like that. I think it's Living an Abundant Life. And go and read that. And it's about this man named Cynic, who I believe lived before Christ, and how everything he thought and he taught, he was some kind of a philosopher, and he taught only the dark side of everything. And I've heard this with young people here today, young people under 20, saying, I don't want to plan anything. I don't want to learn anything. I don't want to do anything because I might be disappointed. See, that's cynicism, where you don't want to do anything. You don't look for hope. You don't look for brightness. You don't look for success. And I don't always have success, but I enjoy trying to get it. That to me is more fun, to get it. And I might sew a dress and it doesn't turn out at all or anything, but I sure did enjoy it. And so, I mean, it's just, if you go shopping, you don't sew, but you go shopping for dresses, I'm sure there's a lot of things you bring home that you don't like, or that you might wear a while and decide you don't like it. So we don't have success in everything. It's the achievement of it. It's going towards it that is looking forward that helps us. Okay, to sum the above, do not take a negative, complaining attitude towards life. That's not how to win friends and influence people. Some folks are like springs, an editorial writer once said. When they come into a group, everybody picks up. They are life builders, conversation makers, thought producers. They stimulate our ideas. Most of us are dry clods. One of these spring people comes along and thoughts flourish like fresh grass and flowers, moistened by the trickling waters. One of my friends asked herself the following question when any party is over. Am I exhilarated or am I exhausted? There are some people that just will drain your energy, just drain you so bad. Just being around them is so depressing that it's like I think they call it, well, there's a name for it today, where it's like brain trauma. And after you've been around somebody that's just kind of sucking the life out of you with all their bad news and all their bad attitude towards life, it's hard to focus again. It's like they sucked your personality out or your soul out. You have to almost go to Hobby Lobby and walk around for an hour to recover from people like this, don't you think? Um, so one of my friends asked herself the following questions when any party is over. Am I exhilarated or am I exhausted? If I am exhausted, it is a painful, tired feeling. Or is it a happy, tired feeling? So you can be exhausted from being happy too. But the happy, tired feeling usually follows a day in the country, a trip on a sailboat, or is the contented tiredness one experiences when all the Christmas packages are mailed. The painful, tired feeling follows a social engagement when you have failed to apply the principles I gave you in this lesson, and have started an argument, made a tactless remark, and shown resentment. Now, tactfulness is so important, and there are many Christians that believe that you have to tell this absolute blank truth all the time, even if it hurts someone's feeling, even if it destroys a friendship, even if it destroys your relationship with God and with them. And that tactfulness is so much important that you don't need to tell somebody something rude and cruel just because it's honest. And you also don't need to reveal things of your life and your past just because it's the truth, just because it's honest. You have to have some tact. So if you want to look up that word tact, and if we were having a class, I'd have you come back and teach and take turns speaking about what tact is. I'd really like to hear what you have to say, what tact is. Now, sometimes tact it's fun to be tactless if it's funny and if it's amusing and if it tickles you, but it's not always nice. So here she has some more advice, and the sun is going down fast, so I don't have much light left. So you've got just a few more minutes here. Select social activities. Obviously, to get the most pleasure out of all social contacts, you must approach a gathering in a receptive state of mind. Eliminate the feeling that certain social engagements must be made. I do not advocate inviting people merely to be courteous, nor accepting invitations because they are extended. If you arrange the gathering, bring together only those persons who may be linked by a common bond. You know, that's so important, because if you get I forget what it's called, but you get somebody who's a downer in that group, they can I have seen people who won't come back to a tea party if they know that such a person is going to be there, who's just going to ruin the fun of everybody. And so that's really important, not to mix people that don't get along, or to include someone who you know is going to ruin it. So, develop true social interest in social mindedness. If you are sincerely interested in people and wish to bring people together for their mutual pleasure, you need not worry about whether or not you're invited in return. You see, it says your hours will be so full of activity that such an ideal will find no room in your mind. This is so true, and for years it really bothered me that we never got invited back. A lot of people just feel inadequate. I'm more experienced, and so they're going to just let me do it, and they won't invite me back for tea. They won't. But I'll just get all my stuff out and invite them over anyway, and I'm terribly busy, and it doesn't bother me anymore that I don't get invited back. And you're going to find this too. Once you have something that you're doing, other people don't seem to pick it up like they used to. Back in the 1950s, if we saw someone succeeding at something, we wanted to know what the secret was and what the plan was, as we wanted to do it too. But now we don't find that they're not wanting to emulate that. And even the Bible talks about how we should, I don't know what the word was exactly, but it was to compete with one another in love and good works, and to stimulate one another and provoke one another to be in love and good works. And it was almost like there was a competition to see who could help people the most, or do things for other people the most, or compliment them the most. Well, now they're not doing that so much. But if you don't get invited back, then you have more time. You have more time to plan the next get-together and the next social activity, and you have more time to clean your house, and you have more time to go do things on your own. And Now, so I hope that one day we will return to people, being able to be in each other's homes once in a while. Um, this has kind of gone by the way since so many women went to work because their weekends were spent cleaning or running around and getting caught up on things they didn't get to do during the week. So they're kind of out of the social circle. And even in churches now, they're not having as many social activities. Everybody is so busy. So I just hope that by being a homemaker, it helps other people slow down, and being a homemaker makes you more available for conversations and social activity. So if you have any ideas, please leave a comment for me. And I can see the sun is nearly gone, and I won't. And there's that airplane, that little plane. There's such an interest in small airplanes around here. I notice, especially the young boys and young men. Some of them young as 16, taking flying lessons in these little airplanes. When my father was, so here's your story for today. When my father was very young and he was in his 20s, he went to Alaska with a buddy, and earlier had met my mother in Canada, and he'd gone into in the winters. A lot of the women in Alaska went to the South 48 because it was such a harsh life. And so while this man's wife was gone, my father and his buddy built a small airplane in their living room, and they didn't quite have it finished, and she came back. I guess she came back a little earlier than expected, and she was so upset because you couldn't trust anybody anymore, because if you left, they'd build an airplane in your living room. But that is one of the stories I enjoyed the most. And later on, one of the men flew that airplane over our homestead and dropped a package for us, and just flew off. And it had skis on it too. Thought that was interesting. But I think it's interesting to see the younger people be getting interested in flight in these private airplanes, these small airplanes around here, and even building them themselves. So I hope you have a lovely day, and as a homemaker, I hope you have great success. I hope you get everything shining and clean and lovely and organized, and start working on some of your hot spots. If you're having problems getting organized, you might want to join a free online help that you can go look at Fly Lady and read all her ideas and schedule, and or get in on the email every day as to what you can do. And I hope this has been really helpful to you, and I hope to see you next time, and hopefully more often. So please leave me a comment. That's so important. Thank you. Goodbye.